25 years ago, Amara Wilson arrived in a small town with nothing but hope and a secret that could reshape everything. Rejected because of her skin color, she turned humiliation into a quiet revolution. This is the powerful story of a woman who chose justice over revenge and changed a community forever. "You're Amara Wilson," the man stammered, swallowing hard as his face turned ghostly pale, as if he'd seen a specter in the middle of the day. This isn't going to work." "You never said you were black," Harold Pierce finally managed to choke out. Amara's heart sank as she stood on the station platform, the delicate hat she'd bought for this very moment now feeling like a cruel joke against the weight of humiliation. 3 weeks of travel, 6 months of passionate letters, a trunk packed with hopes and dreams for a fresh start far from the city's relentless discrimination. It all collapsed in an instant, the moment Harold's eyes met hers. "In your letters you wrote so beautifully, I imagined," he faltered, taking an awkward step back. The bouquet of flowers in his sweaty hand drooped, petals wilting with his shame. "Couldn't you have warned me?" Drawing in a steadying breath, Amara summoned every scrap of dignity she had left. "Warn you about what, exactly? That my skin is as dark as midnight, but my feelings are as real as yours? You never asked." Harold's eyes darted nervously, aware of the curious glances from other travelers and station workers. In the small town of Riverbrook, a well-dressed black woman was already a spectacle, and a white man publicly rejecting her only made the scene more gripping. "You have to understand my position, the community here, my business," he muttered, retreating another step. "I can pay for your ticket back. You seem educated. I'm sure you'll understand." A chill ran down Amara's spine, not from sadness, but from a quiet, simmering rage. In his letters, Harold had painted himself as a lonely 45-year-old widower craving companionship, understanding, and a second chance at love. At no point had he mentioned a preference for a certain skin color. "I spent every penny I had to get here," she said, her voice calm but trembling inside. "I have nowhere else to go." Harold fumbled in his pocket and pulled out crumpled bills. "This should cover a place for a few days, until you figure things out." Then a deep voice cut through the tense air like thunder on a clear afternoon. "Is that your solution, Pierce? Throw money at the problem and hope it disappears like always." A tall man appeared behind Harold, his piercing eyes locked onto the shrinking merchant. Though dressed simply, his clothes spoke of subtle wealth, the kind only true privilege can afford. His sun-kissed face told stories of time spent outdoors, yet his posture held an undeniable authority. "This is none of your concern," Harold said, but his voice faltered. "It becomes my concern when I see a man I've known for 15 years act like a coward," the stranger said. Turning to Amara, his gaze softened just a bit. "Miss, allow me to introduce myself. Alexander Maxwell. I own a property just outside the city." Amara nodded cautiously, the wary lessons of experience teaching her that kindness from strangers often came with strings attached. "If I may be so bold," Alexander continued, "I offer you lodging at my home until you decide your next steps. We have guest rooms rarely used, and my housekeeper would be glad for company." Harold choked on the offer. "Maxwell, you can't be serious. What will people say?" Alexander smiled coldly, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "The same people who do business with me every day. The same people who rely on my land for their livelihood. I'm curious to see what they'll say." Harold paled, the unspoken message sinking in. Alexander Maxwell wasn't just any farmer, he owned half the productive land in the region. What no one at the station knew was that while Amara battled between wounded pride and practical necessity, she carried not only a trunk of clothes but a secret, one powerful enough to shift the balance of power in that small town forever. A secret that would make Harold Pierce bitterly regret ever judging a person by the color of their skin. If this story of prejudice and resilience moves you, don't forget to subscribe and follow along to see how a moment of humiliation ignited a transformation nobody saw coming. The Maxwell estate was far more than the modest farm its owner described. It was a sprawling Victorian mansion, surrounded by acres of flourishing plantations and lush pastures, where thoroughbred horses grazed peacefully. As Alexander's carriage passed beneath the grand gates, Amara felt both impressed and guarded. "People here aren't used to difference," Alexander explained, gesturing toward the manor. Riverbrook had been founded by old families, stubbornly stuck in the past. Harold Pierce is just a symptom of a deeper sickness. Mrs. Foster, the housekeeper, greeted Amara with professional courtesy, kind eyes behind a stiff posture. If she was surprised to see a black guest, she didn't let it show. "I've prepared the blue room," she said, leading Amara through halls adorned with priceless paintings and antique furnishings. "It has the best view of the garden." That evening, seated in the grand dining room, Alexander shared his story. The son of a northern banker and a teacher who had championed abolition, he'd inherited not just wealth but unyielding principles of equality. When he moved to Riverbrook 15 years earlier, he'd been viewed as eccentric. Too wealthy to be shunned outright, yet too different to be fully accepted. "And what is your story, Miss Wilson?" he finally asked. After explaining her previous work, Amara hesitated, but Alexander's straightforward manner gave her courage. "I was a teacher in Boston," she said, "literature and history, at a school for girls of color. When the school closed from lack of funding, I realized I needed a fresh start." What Amara kept to herself was the real reason for her letters, an unexpected inheritance from her grandfather, a man who had spent his life as a butler for a wealthy family. That inheritance included carefully saved gold coins and ancient documents with the power to reshape land ownership in Riverbrook. She had hidden these secrets in a false bottom of her trunk. In the days that followed, Alexander gave Amara something rare: space to think. The mansion's vast library was a treasured trove of history and law. Immersed in books on local geography and regional statutes, she would smile when asked about her interests, simply saying, "I'm broadening my horizons." A week after Amara's arrival, word of her presence had spread like wildfire through the tight-knit town. Visits to the Maxwell estate increased sharply. Neighbors, merchants' wives, even the local reverend suddenly found urgent reasons to stop by. "Just look at that," Alexander muttered during afternoon tea after another overly conspicuous delegation had departed. "You've become the town's new spectacle without ever setting foot in Riverbrook proper." Amara gave a bitter smile. "I've always been an attraction, Mr. Maxwell. The difference now is that I'm holding a porcelain teacup and being watched." It was during one of these visits that Harold Pierce finally summoned the nerve to appear. He arrived unannounced, hat in hand, his face plastered with a mask of false concern. "Maxwell," he greeted nervously. "I just came to check if Miss Wilson is comfortable." "Absolutely delighted," Alexander replied, his tone sharp. "Why don't you ask her yourself?" Harold's face turned pale as Amara entered the room, now wearing one of the elegant dresses Mrs. Foster had tailored for her, not the exhausted, humiliated woman from the station anymore, but a lady moving with quiet confidence and unmistakable purpose. "Mr. Pierce," she greeted coldly. "What an unexpected surprise." Harold fidgeted with his hat, clearly unsettled. "I came because the community is concerned about your well-being." "Well, kind of them," Amara said, eyes narrowing. Harold glanced nervously at Alexander. "It's not proper for an unmarried woman to remain in the residence of an unmarried man, especially when she's black." Alexander's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Go on, Pierce, I'm curious to hear how you plan to finish that sentence." Swallowing hard, Harold muttered, "The church committee is considering ways to help her return to Boston. A collection is being organized." Amara gave a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "How generous! But I'm afraid my plans have changed. I intend to remain in Riverbrook indefinitely." Harold's eyes widened in disbelief. "That's impossible. You don't know anyone here. You have no job, no family." "I have a job," Amara said calmly. "Mr. Maxwell has kindly offered me the position of librarian on his estate. Apparently, generations of Maxwells have amassed books without ever organizing them properly." Harold stared at Alexander, stunned and barely concealing his fury. "You can't be serious." Alexander shrugged. "Never been more serious. Miss Wilson is educated and capable. My library has never been in better hands." What Harold didn't realize as he stumbled through feeble protests was the true weight of that role. The Maxwell Library wasn't just a collection of classic literature. It housed land records, legal documents, and the full history of the region, records that many of Riverbrook's traditional families would rather keep buried. When Harold finally left, defeated and furious, Alexander watched from the window as he stormed across the garden. "He'll try to make your life miserable," he said quietly. "But the little blow to his ego today won't be forgotten." If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps give light to voices that deserve to be seen and heard. Amara nodded, a fierce new determination glowing in her eyes. "Let him try. While he's busy spreading petty rumors, I'll be uncovering truths he never imagined." What Harold Pierce and no one in Riverbrook could guess was that the hours Amara spent in the dusty library had a precise purpose. Among yellowed documents and brittle records, she was piecing together a puzzle destined to reveal a hard truth. Riverbrook's founding families, including the Pierces, had built their fortunes on land that was never rightfully theirs. As whispers swirled about the woman of color residing at the Maxwell mansion, Amara was quietly setting the stage for a revelation that would shake the entire community to its core. 2 weeks later, Riverbrook's small town hall was packed beyond capacity. An emergency meeting had summoned the founding families, merchants and farmers from all corners of the region. At the center of the commotion, Harold Pierce gestured wildly, his face flushed with indignation. "It's an outrage," he declared. "Maxwell is openly defying our traditions by harboring that woman on his property. Decent families are worried about rumors of inappropriate behavior." As murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, the doors swung open. Alexander Maxwell entered calmly, followed by Amara Wilson, who walked with the dignity of a queen. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. "I appreciate the invitation," Alexander said, his voice steady and commanding, filling the hall. "But I must correct a misunderstanding. Miss Wilson is not here as my guest. She is the legal representative in a matter that concerns every one of you." Harold laughed nervously. "Legal representative? A woman of color with no education or authority? Maxwell, have you lost your mind?" Methodically, Amara opened her briefcase. "Actually, Mr. Pierce, in addition to being a certified teacher, I hold legal power of attorney as a direct descendant of Joseph Freeman." The name struck like lightning. The room fell silent, older faces visibly paled. "Joseph Freeman doesn't exist," Harold blurted quickly. "He's just an urban legend." Curious, Amara began pulling yellowed documents from her briefcase. "I have here the original deed, signed by the governor in 1866, granting Joseph Freeman, my great-grandfather and a man freed after the Civil War, the land that now makes up approximately 60% of Riverbrook, including your store, Mr. Pierce." Judge Thornton adjusted his glasses, examining the papers Amara presented. This looks authentic." "That's a forgery!" Harold shouted, though his voice wavered. Amara remained unfazed. "Supporting records are here as well, including accounts of how Joseph Freeman was forced to flee after attempted lynchings in 1870, and how the founding families divided his land among themselves, creating what they called the Riverbrook Property Committee." Alexander added, "The Maxwell Library holds copies of all land records in the region. Curious how the specific session from 1870 to 1872 was missing, until Miss Wilson found cross-references in other documents." Reverend Miller, an elderly man, bowed his head. "My father spoke of that story. He said it was a sin buried deep." "We are not here to punish descendants for their ancestors' sins," Amara declared. "I propose the creation of a community foundation to benefit all citizens of Riverbrook, especially in education and affordable housing." Harold Pierce laughed nervously. "That's absurd. No one will believe this charade." At that moment, Attorney Jeff, a respected lawyer practicing across 3 states, entered the hall. The documents have been verified by the State Historical Records Commission. They are authentic. I am pleased to inform you the lawsuit has been formally filed." The room erupted in chaos. Amid the uproar, Harold lunged furiously at Amara. "You planned this from the start," he hissed. "That's what you were hiding in your letters." Amara remained calm. "No, Mr. Pierce. In my letters I was a lonely woman seeking companionship. It was your immediate rejection, when you saw me, that revealed the kind of man you truly are. A man who judges my great-grandfather for the same reason you judged me, the color of our skin." "You're going to ruin us," he muttered, pale and defeated. "No," she said softly, her voice steady. "I'm here to right a historical wrong in the fairest way possible. For everyone. The difference between us, Mr. Pierce, is that I have faced discrimination my entire life, yet I don't wish hardship on anyone, not even you." Harold Pierce slumped into a chair, defeated. The city council withdrew to consider Amara's proposal. Alexander approached her, admiration shining in his eyes. "You could have demanded everything," he said quietly. She smiled, a quiet strength in her gaze. "Justice isn't revenge, Alexander. It's restoration." What no one in that room could have predicted as they watched the woman they once rejected was that the true transformation of Riverbrook was only just beginning. The legacy that would echo through halls of power for generations to come wasn't about destruction, but about a woman who, even when wounded, chose to rebuild with dignity and vision. While Harold Pierce faced the ruin of his reputation, Amara Wilson and Alexander Maxwell exchanged a look filled with promise, a future where belonging wouldn't be defined by skin color but by character. 6 months after that historic meeting, Riverbrook had been transformed. The Freeman Foundation, established with funds recovered from historical injustice, was already supporting scholarships for disadvantaged youth and community projects. At the heart of this change was Amara, not as a figure of vengeance, but as a visionary who saw beyond pain toward lasting hope. Harold Pierce's old store had been converted into Riverbrook's first public library, a place where forgotten stories could finally be told. Harold himself left town weeks after the revelations, selling his properties for a fraction of their worth and disappearing without a word. Rumor had it he was working as a clerk in a neighboring town, his pride and bank account both diminished. "You could have destroyed him completely," Alexander remarked one crisp fall afternoon as they walked through the gardens of her estate, now partially transformed into a cultural center. Amara smiled, watching children play on lawns that had once been exclusive grounds for the elite. "Revenge might have brought satisfaction for a day," she said, gesturing around her. "But this, the life we're building here, will bring satisfaction for generations." News of the Freeman heirs spread beyond Riverbrook, attracting journalists and historians eager to document similar stories of historical land injustice. Amara received invitations to speak at universities, sharing not only her personal journey, but the legal strategies she'd used to reclaim truth and justice. At a celebratory dinner in the grand hall of the Maxwell Mansion, now officially renamed the Freeman Maxwell House following the discreet marriage of its owners, Judge Thornton raised his glass in an unexpected toast. "To the woman who taught us that justice is not just a legal concept but a daily practice," he declared, voice thick with emotion. "When Amara arrived in our town, we thought we knew exactly who she was, based solely on her appearance. What a humbling and necessary lesson we learned." Beside him, Martha Webb, now principal of the new community school, nodded vigorously. "And to think, it all began with a cruel rejection at the train station." Alexander took Amara's hand gently. "The best decision Harold Pierce ever made was to reject you," he whispered with a smile, "though I doubt he'd agree." In the old central square, where only the founding families were once celebrated, a new monument now stood. A simple bronze plaque telling the story of Joseph Freeman and how his land, once stolen unjustly, had finally been restored to serve the entire community. As night fell over Riverbrook, Amara watched the city lights from her new porch. She had arrived as a rejected stranger, a black woman deemed unworthy to belong. Now she was accepted and respected. not for yielding to others' expectations, but for standing firm in her principles. When Alexander joined her with 2 cups of tea, Amara reflected on the journey that brought them here. "You know what's ironic," she said. "Tell me," he replied. "Harold rejected me because he couldn't imagine sharing his life with someone who didn't fit into his narrow worldview. In the end, that's exactly what destroyed him, while you thrived because of what he despised. Your strength, your history, your truth." Alexander smiled softly. The lesson Riverbrook learned, and one that will echo for generations, is simple but profound. When we judge someone by superficial traits, we deny their humanity and blind ourselves to the extraordinary value they bring. As Amara Wilson Maxwell watched the moon rise over the city that once rejected her, she knew true justice was never about punishing Harold Pierce. It was about building something so beautiful, so fair, and so enduring that his rejection would become nothing more than a footnote in a much larger story, one of hope, courage, and community. If this story of overcoming prejudice and achieving justice with dignity moved your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring tales that remind us all. Our differences are not barriers, but powerful sources of strength that can transform entire communities. Peace. Thank you for watching this story with us today. In a world that can sometimes feel divided, it's the kindness we show, the compassion we carry, and the quiet acts of justice that truly change lives, often in ways we never see coming. Remember, every small choice to stand with dignity, to speak with courage, or to lend a hand creates ripples far beyond what we imagine. If this story touched your heart, please consider sharing it with someone who might need a little hope today. And if you'd like to be part of more journeys that celebrate the strength of the human spirit, we'd be honored to have you join our Kindlight community. As the writer Maya Angelou said, "Try to be a rainbow in someone's cloud." Together, we can be that light. Take care, and until next time.